The warning alarms screamed through the bridge of the Prometheus like banshees in the night. Captain Sarah Chen gripped her command chair as the ship shuddered violently, its hull groaning under forces that shouldn't exist. "Report," she barked, over the chaos. Lieutenant Marcus Webb's fingers flew across his console, sweat beading on his dark skin. "We've crossed it, Captain. We're officially beyond the galactic edge. And the readings." He paused, his voice catching. "They don't make sense." Through the view screen, space itself looked wrong. The familiar backdrop of stars had vanished, replaced by something that hurt to look at directly. A writhing mass of colors that existed beyond human perception, constantly shifting between dimensions that the mind couldn't quite grasp. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's xenobiologist, stumbled across the bridge as another tremor rocked the vessel. Her usually pristine lab coat was disheveled, her Hispanic features pale with fear and excitement. "Captain, the quantum readings are off the charts. Whatever's out there, it's not bound by our physics." "Impossible," muttered Chief Engineer Rajesh Patel from his station. The elderly Indian man's hands moved with practiced precision across his controls, but his weathered face showed concern. "The laws of physics are universal. They have to be." Sarah Chen had commanded vessels for 15 years, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Humanity's first journey beyond their home galaxy had been meant as a simple reconnaissance mission. Now, 3 months into uncharted space, they'd discovered something that challenged everything they thought they knew about the universe. "Distance from the edge?" she asked. "Approximately 50,000 light-years and increasing," Webb reported. "But Captain, that's not the strangest thing. I'm detecting structures out there, massive ones." On the screen, shapes began to materialize. From the cosmic chaos, geometric forms that twisted through impossible angles, their surfaces reflecting light that seemed to come from nowhere. They were vast, each one easily the size of a solar system, yet they moved with fluid grace through the void. "My God," whispered Dr. Vasquez. "Are those ships?" Before anyone could answer, every console on the bridge suddenly went dark. The emergency lighting cast eerie red shadows across the crew's faces as they sat in stunned silence. Then, one by one, the screens flickered back to life. But the displays now showed symbols that no human had ever seen. "The universal translator isn't recognizing any of this," Webb said, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. In all of humanity's encounters with alien species, and there had been many since they'd joined the III Galactic community 50 years ago, the universal translator had never failed. It was based on mathematical principles that were supposed to be truly universal. "Captain," Chief Patel's voice was tight with worry. "I'm reading massive energy signatures converging on our position. Whatever those things are, they're taking notice of us." The view screen filled with light as one of the massive structures approached. Up close, it defied description. Part machine, part organism, part something else entirely. Its surface rippled like liquid metal while maintaining perfect geometric precision. Tendrils of energy reached out from its core, each one crackling with power that made the Prometheus's fusion reactors look like candles. "Should we run?" Webb asked, his hand hovering over the navigation controls. Sarah stared at the approaching entity, her mind racing. Humanity had always prided itself on being explorers, on pushing boundaries and seeking out the unknown. But this felt different. This felt like they'd stumbled into something ancient and vast and utterly beyond their comprehension. "No," she said finally. "We came here to discover what lies beyond our galaxy. Well, here it is. We document everything and try to establish communication." "And if they're hostile?" Dr. Vasquez asked. Sarah's jaw tightened. "Then we make sure Earth knows what's coming." The massive entity came to a stop just outside weapons range, though Sarah doubted their weapons would be effective against something that large. For several minutes, nothing happened. The bridge crew held their breath, waiting. Then the communication array sparked to life with a signal unlike anything they'd ever received. It wasn't electromagnetic radiation or quantum entanglement. It was something that seemed to bypass their technology entirely and speak directly to their minds. Small ones from the spiral arm. The voice resonated through their thoughts, neither male nor female, carrying harmonics that suggested vast age and terrible knowledge. You have traveled far from your spawning grounds. Dr. Vasquez grabbed Sarah's arm, her eyes wide. Captain, it's not just communicating with us, it's reading our minds. It knows what we are, where we came from. Indeed, Fleshbearer, your species' thoughts are simple, predictable, like all the others who have ventured into our domain. Others? Sarah spoke aloud, hoping the entity could hear her. What others? The view screen shimmered, and suddenly they were looking at what appeared to be a graveyard. Thousands upon thousands of ships floated in the void, some recognizable as vessels from species humanity knew, others completely alien. All were dark, lifeless hulks. Those who came before, explorers like yourselves, seeking knowledge they were not prepared to possess. Chief Patel's hands trembled as he worked his console. Captain, I'm reading massive gravitational distortions throughout this region. It's like space itself is being warped on an industrial scale. Your engineer speaks truth. We shape reality as you shape metal. It is necessary for our work. What work? Dr. Vasquez asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. The entity's response came not in words but in images that flooded their minds. They saw galaxies spinning like wheels, connected by streams of energy and matter that flowed like rivers. They saw stars being born and dying in patterns too complex to understand, and at the center of it all, vast intelligences that guided the cosmic dance with purposes beyond mortal comprehension. We are the gardeners of reality, small ones. We tend the infinite garden, ensuring that existence itself continues to flourish. But why kill the explorers? Sarah demanded. What threat could we possibly pose to beings like you? The entity's presence in their minds grew heavier, more oppressive. Knowledge without wisdom is destruction. Your species, like many others, seeks to understand before learning to accept. You would take our gifts and turn them into weapons. Images flashed through their minds again, civilizations that had gained cosmic-level technology only to destroy themselves and others. Entire star systems reduced to ash by those who thought they could wield godlike power without consequence. And yet, the entity continued, your kind shows potential. Lieutenant Webb looked up from his console, confusion evident on his face. Potential for what? To transcend, to move beyond the primitive drives that have held your species in the spiral arm. But first, you must prove yourselves worthy. The massive structure began to move, its impossible geometry shifting as it aligned itself with the Prometheus. Energy began to build along its surface, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. Captain, Chief Patel warned, massive power buildup. I don't think they're planning to destroy us, but whatever they're doing. Sarah felt her heart racing. What kind of test? One that will reveal the true nature of your species. Prepare yourselves, children of Earth. Your trial begins now. The screen went white as energy engulfed the Prometheus, and Captain Sarah Chen had just enough time to wonder if she'd doomed humanity before consciousness fled. Chapter 2. The Trial. Begins. Sarah's eyes snapped open to find herself lying on what felt like warm stone. The familiar hum of the ship's engines was gone, replaced by an eerie silence that seemed to press against her eardrums. She sat up slowly, her head spinning, and looked around in amazement. She was in a vast chamber that defied architectural logic. The walls curved upward into infinity, their surfaces covered in symbols that seemed to move when she wasn't looking directly at them. The air itself glowed with a soft, sourceless light that made everything visible without casting shadows. Captain! Dr. Vasquez's voice echoed from somewhere nearby. Sarah turned to see her crew scattered across the chamber floor, all beginning to stir. Lieutenant Webb was helping Chief Patel to his feet, while several other crew members were examining their surroundings with a mixture of awe and terror. Everyone here? Sarah called out, taking a quick head count. 23 crew members, the entire complement of the Prometheus, all present and apparently unharmed. "Where are we?" asked Ensign Kim Nakamura, the ship's communications officer. The young Japanese woman's voice trembled slightly as she stared up at the impossible architecture surrounding them. Before anyone could answer, the chamber filled with that same mental voice they'd heard before. "Welcome to the testing ground, children of Earth. Here, your species will face challenges that will reveal your true nature." The walls shimmered, and suddenly they could see through them to the void beyond. The massive entity that had captured them floated outside, but now they could see others. Dozens of similar structures arranged in a complex pattern around what appeared to be an artificial star. "Observe," the voice commanded. New images filled their minds. Scenes from humanity's history. They saw the first humans leaving Africa, spreading across their world despite countless dangers. They saw the development of agriculture, the rise of civilizations, the long struggle toward spaceflight. But they also saw the wars, the genocides, the environmental destruction that had nearly ended their species twice. Your kind has shown both great potential and great folly. The question now is, which aspect will dominate when faced with ultimate power? Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her scientific training overriding her fear. "What kind of test are you planning to give us?" "3 trials, Fleshbearer. First, you must demonstrate wisdom in the face of temptation. Second, you must show compassion, even for your enemies. Third, you must prove you can transcend your primitive desires for dominance." The chamber began to shift around them, walls flowing like liquid to form new configurations. When the movement stopped, they found themselves in what looked like a perfect recreation of Earth's United Nations Assembly Hall, but with a twist. Instead of national flags, banners hung from the ceiling showing the emblems of various alien species humanity had encountered. "I don't understand," Lieutenant Webb said, looking around in confusion. "What does this have to do with anything?" "Patience, young navigator. The first trial begins now." 3 pedestals rose from the floor, each holding a different object. On the first sat a small device that looked like a crystalline cube, pulsing with internal light. On the second was what appeared to be a weapon of some kind, sleek, deadly, and radiating power. On the third was a simple book, its pages blank. Before you lie 3 gifts. The first contains the knowledge to manipulate matter at the atomic level, to create or destroy anything you can imagine. The second is a weapon capable of destroying entire star systems. The third is the wisdom to use such power responsibly. Sarah felt her breath catch. The implications were staggering. With the first device, humanity could solve every material problem they'd ever faced, end hunger, cure disease, terraform worlds in days instead of centuries. The weapon, well, that would make them the dominant military force in the galaxy. You may choose 2 of the 3, but choose carefully. Your decision will echo across the cosmos for millennia to come. Chief Patel approached the pedestals cautiously, his engineering background making him naturally curious about the technology. "Captain, if we could understand how the matter manipulator works, we could revolutionize everything," Dr. Vasquez finished, her eyes bright with scientific fervor. "Medicine, construction, terraforming, the applications would be limitless." Ensign Nakamura was staring at the weapon with barely concealed hunger. "And with that, no one would ever threaten Earth again. We could protect ourselves, our allies." Sarah found herself torn. Both the matter manipulator and the weapon represented quantum leaps forward for humanity. But something about the test felt wrong, like a trap waiting to be sprung. "What's in the book?" she asked aloud. "The understanding that power without wisdom leads only to destruction, the knowledge of how to live in harmony with the cosmos rather than seeking to dominate it." Lieutenant Webb laughed bitterly. "Wisdom? That's not going to help us when the Korthax Empire decides to expand into human space, or when the next asteroid heads for Earth." Sarah studied her crew's faces. seeing the hunger for power reflected in many of them. She couldn't blame them. These devices represented everything humanity had ever dreamed of achieving. But the entity's words echoed in her mind. Knowledge, without wisdom, is destruction. We take the book, she said finally. Captain, Chief Patel protested. Think about what you're saying. We could solve every problem facing our species. Could we? Sarah challenged. Or would we just create new problems? How many wars have been fought over resources? How many conflicts started because one side had better weapons than the other? Dr. Vasquez shook her head. But Captain, the scientific applications alone would require wisdom to use properly, Sarah interrupted. And apparently, that's what the book contains. She walked to the third pedestal and picked up the book. The moment her fingers touched its cover, knowledge flooded her mind. Not facts or formulas, but understanding. She saw the rise and fall of countless civilizations, the patterns that led to growth or destruction, the delicate balance required to wield cosmic power without being consumed by it. Interesting. The entity's voice carried what might have been approval. Most species cannot resist the lure of immediate power. The chamber began to shift again, and Sarah found herself facing a new challenge. But first she had to deal with her crew's anger and disappointment. She could see it in their faces, the feeling that she'd just cost humanity its greatest opportunity. Captain, Lieutenant Webb said quietly. I hope you know what you're doing. So did Sarah. But as the second trial began to take shape around them, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real test wasn't about the gifts at all. It was about what they revealed about the people making the choice. The walls dissolved, replaced by what looked like the command center of an alien vessel. But this wasn't just any alien ship. Sarah recognized the distinctive architecture of the Zephyrian Empire, humanity's most bitter enemies. Behold, the entity's voice filled their minds. Your greatest foes, broken and helpless. Through the view screen, they could see a Zephyrian colony ship limping through space, its hull breached in dozens of places. Escape pods were launching from the dying vessel, each one carrying families fleeing for their lives. Those are civilians, Dr. Vasquez whispered, her medical training making her immediately recognize the scope of the disaster. Indeed, the second trial is simple. You have the power to save them or let them die. Remember, these are the beings who have killed millions of your kind in the recent wars. The chamber's controls came alive, showing that they had everything needed to mount a rescue operation. But they also showed something else. Long-range sensors detecting a massive Zephyrian battle fleet approaching. If they stayed to help, they would likely be captured or destroyed. Sarah's jaw clenched as she stared at the screen. The Zephyrians had shown no mercy to human civilians during the war. Cities had been bombed, colonies devastated, families torn apart. Many of her crew had lost loved ones to Zephyrian aggression. Let them burn, Ensign Nakamura said coldly. They never showed us mercy. Several other crew members nodded in agreement, their faces hard with remembered pain and loss. But Dr. Vasquez was already moving toward the rescue controls. They're civilians. Children. We can't just... Can't we? Chief Patel's voice was bitter. My brother died on Kepler Station when they bombed it. These people celebrated that victory. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of command pressing down on her. This was the hardest decision she'd ever faced, not because of the tactical considerations, but because of what it said about who they were as a species. Begin rescue operations, she ordered. The protests were immediate and loud, but Sarah held up her hand for silence. We do this not because they deserve it, but because we do. Because showing mercy to our enemies is what separates us from them. Fascinating, the entity observed as they worked to save the Zephyrian refugees. Many species fail this trial completely. They allow past grievances to override their moral development. As the last escape pod was brought aboard the simulation, Sarah felt something shift in her understanding. This wasn't just about passing tests. It was about evolving as a species, about becoming something more than they had been. But the third trial was yet to come, and somehow she suspected it would be the most difficult of all. Chapter 3. The Ultimate Choice. The rescue simulation faded away, leaving the crew of the Prometheus standing once again in the impossible chamber. But something had changed in the atmosphere. The oppressive weight of being judged had lifted slightly, replaced by what Sarah could only describe as anticipation. 2 trials completed. The entity's voice resonated through their minds, carrying new harmonics that suggested something like respect. Your species shows promise, children of Earth, but the final test will determine your ultimate fate. The chamber began to expand, its walls flowing outward until they found themselves standing in what looked like the command center of a cosmic observatory. Screens filled the air around them, each one showing different views of the galaxy they'd left behind: Earth, the colonies, the great stations that housed billions of human souls. "What are we looking at?" Dr. Vasquez asked, though her voice suggested she might already know. "Your home, your people, your entire civilization as it exists at this moment." Lieutenant Webb stepped closer to one of the screens, his face pale. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy buildups throughout this region of space. The entities, there are thousands of them." Sarah's blood ran cold as she began to understand. "What do you want from us?" "The final trial is simple in concept, complex in execution. We offer your species a choice that will determine its future and the future of this galaxy." New images appeared on the screens, vast cosmic engineering projects that defied imagination. Stars being moved like chess pieces, planets reshaped at will, space itself being folded and manipulated to create impossible structures. For eons, we have guided the development of galactic civilization from beyond the edge. We are the architects of order, the guardians of stability, but our time is ending. "Ending?" Chief Patel asked, his engineering mind immediately grasping the implications. "You're dying, not dying, transcending, moving to planes of existence beyond physical reality. But our work must continue. The galaxy requires shepherds, beings who can guide its development without seeking to dominate it." The screens zoomed in to show various alien civilizations, all at different stages of development. Some were peaceful and advanced, others were warlike and destructive. All seemed to be following patterns that were somehow familiar. "We have watched your species for millennia, seeing in you a potential that few others possess. You are young enough to adapt, wise enough to learn, and strong enough to bear the burden of cosmic responsibility." "You want us to replace you," Sarah realized, the magnitude of what was being offered hitting her like a physical blow. "We offer you the tools and knowledge to become the new gardeners of reality, to guide the development of civilizations, to prevent the wars that would destroy billions, to nurture the growth of wisdom throughout the cosmos." The screens showed them what this would mean: the power to reshape matter and energy at will, to travel instantly across vast distances, to influence the development of entire worlds. They would become gods, essentially, with all the responsibility that entailed. Dr. Vasquez was staring at the displays with undisguised awe. The scientific opportunities alone. We could unlock the deepest mysteries of the universe. And save countless lives, added Ensign Nakamura. No more wars, no more suffering on the scale we've seen. But Lieutenant Webb looked troubled. "What's the catch?" "There's always a catch. Wisdom beyond your years, young navigator. Indeed, there is a price. To accept this role, humanity must abandon its physical existence. You would become beings, of pure energy and thought, forever separated from the species you were born to." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They were being offered godhood, but at the cost of their humanity. "What about Earth?" Sarah asked quietly. "What about our families, our friends, everyone we've left behind? They would continue to exist and develop naturally, guided by your invisible hand. They would never know what you had become, but they would benefit from your wisdom and protection." Chief Patel shook his head slowly, to watch over them, but never touch them again, never speak to them, never be with them. The burden of cosmic responsibility is profound, engineer, but consider the alternative. The screens changed, showing darker possibilities, wars that would consume the galaxy, civilizations destroying themselves with weapons beyond imagination, the slow entropy that would eventually claim all life if left unguided. Without shepherds, chaos will inevitably triumph. Your species, along with all others, will eventually face extinction. But with guidance, they could achieve greatness beyond current comprehension. Sarah looked around at her crew, seeing the conflict in their faces. This was the ultimate sacrifice, giving up everything they were to save everything they loved. "How do we know you're telling the truth?" she asked. "How do we know this isn't some elaborate deception?" "You do not. Faith, Captain Chen, is part of what makes your species unique, the willingness to risk everything for the greater good." Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her scientific training warring with her human emotions. "If we refuse, then we will seek another species to carry the burden, and humanity will face its destiny alone, as all civilizations must." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of perhaps the most important decision in human history resting on her shoulders. Around her, her crew waited in tense silence. Can we have time to think about it?" "Time is what you do not have, Captain. Even now, the forces of chaos stir in your galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire prepares for a final war that will consume billions. The Korthax Collective experiments with weapons that could unravel reality itself. Without intervention, your civilization has perhaps a century before total collapse." Lieutenant Webb looked up from one of the displays, his face grim. "Captain, I'm reading massive troop buildups on both sides. It looks like they're both planning something big." Sarah opened her eyes, staring at the screens that showed her home galaxy teetering on the brink of a war that would make previous conflicts look like minor skirmishes. "If we accept," she said slowly, "all of us, the entire crew?" "All who choose to ascend, those who wish to remain human, will be returned to your ship and allowed to continue their journey." Sarah looked around at her crew, these 23 people who had trusted her to lead them into the unknown. Now she was asking them to make a choice that would define not just their own futures, but the future of every sentient being in the galaxy. "I need to know," she said finally. "Who's willing to do this? To give up everything we are to save everything we love?" The responses came slowly, each crew member wrestling with the decision. Dr. Vasquez was first. I've spent my life studying life, trying to understand it. If I could protect all life in the galaxy, yes, I'll do it." Chief Patel nodded grimly. "My family is back there. If this is the only way to keep them safe." One by one, 18 of the 23 crew members stepped forward, willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. But Lieutenant Webb and 4 others remained where they were. "I can't," Webb said, his voice breaking. "I have a daughter. She's only 3 years old. I can't give up ever seeing her again." Sarah nodded, understanding completely. "No judgment, Marcus, this is an impossible choice." She turned back to the vast presence that surrounded them. 18 of us accept your offer. The others return to the ship. So be it. Are you prepared to begin your transformation?" Sarah took a deep breath, thinking of Earth, of humanity, of all the species that called the galaxy home. "We are," but even as she spoke the words, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial, that there was another option they hadn't considered. And in the depths of space, ancient powers began to stir as the universe prepared for a changing of the guard that would echo across eternity. Chapter 4. Transformation and Revelation. The chamber filled with light, not the harsh glare of artificial illumination, but something that seemed to come from within reality itself. Sarah felt her body beginning to change, her physical form becoming less substantial as energy patterns replaced flesh and bone. Around her, the 18 crew members who had chosen transcendence were undergoing the same transformation. She could feel their thoughts beginning to merge with hers, their individual personalities expanding into something vast and interconnected. But Lieutenant Webb and the 4 others who had chosen to remain human were backing away, their faces filled with awe and terror as they watched their friends become something beyond mortal comprehension. The process is irreversible, the entity warned. Once begun, there is no return to physical existence. Sarah tried to speak but found that her voice now resonated on frequencies beyond human hearing. I understand, she thought, and was surprised to hear her mental voice echoing across dimensions. The knowledge began to flow into her. Eons of cosmic history, the secrets of matter and energy manipulation, the delicate art of guiding civilizations without controlling them. She saw the rise and fall of countless species, the patterns that led to growth or destruction, the infinite complexity of maintaining balance across billions of worlds. But as the transformation neared completion, Sarah felt something unexpected: doubt. Through her expanding consciousness, she could perceive the 5 remaining human crew members with perfect clarity. Lieutenant Webb was weeping, not just for the friends he was losing, but for his daughter back on Earth who would grow up never knowing what had happened to her father. The others were grappling with their own losses, loves left behind, dreams abandoned, lives interrupted by this cosmic calling. Wait, Sarah's transformed voice echoed through the chamber. There's something wrong here. The flow of knowledge paused, and she felt the entity's attention focus on her with startling intensity. Explain your concern, newly ascended one. Sarah's consciousness expanded, allowing her to perceive the cosmic machinery that surrounded them, the vast network of energy and matter that the entity used to manipulate reality. But as she looked deeper, she began to see cracks in the structure, signs of decay and entropy that suggested something far different from what they'd been told. You are not transcending, she realized with growing horror. You're dying, and you need us not as replacements but as fuel. The chamber shuddered as the entity's composed facade began to crack. Your species' perception is more acute than anticipated. Around Sarah, the other transformed crew members began to understand as well. Through their connected consciousness, they shared the terrible realization that they had been deceived. Chief Patel's transformed voice joined the mental conversation. The energy patterns. They're not about cosmic gardening at all. They're about survival. Your survival. Dr. Vasquez's consciousness pulsed with scientific rage. You're parasites. You've been consuming the life force of entire species, using them to extend your own existence. Survival is the first law of existence, the entity replied, its mental voice now carrying harmonics of desperation. We have maintained order in the galaxy for millions of years. That order requires sacrifice. Sarah felt the transformation trying to complete itself, her individual consciousness beginning to dissolve into the entity's vast hunger. But the knowledge she'd gained also showed her something else. The entity was not as powerful as it pretended to be. It was ancient, yes, but also weakened by eons of existence, dependent on consuming other forms of life to maintain itself. No, she said, her will crystallizing into pure determination. We choose differently. Using the cosmic knowledge that had been forced into her mind, Sarah began to fight back. The entity had made a critical error. In trying to absorb human consciousness, it had also absorbed human stubbornness, creativity, and the ability to find solutions that others couldn't imagine. There's another way, she told her transformed crew members. We don't have to be victims or parasites. We can be something new. Working together, the 18 transformed humans began to redirect the energy flows around them. Instead of feeding the entity's hunger, they started to heal the decay they'd detected in the cosmic machinery. Impossible, the entity protested, its mental voice now filled with panic. You cannot comprehend the complexity. We don't need to comprehend it, Dr. Vasquez interrupted. We just need to fix it. That's what humans do. We solve problems. The chamber around them began to change as the transformed crew took control of the cosmic engineering systems. Instead of the sterile perfection the entity had maintained, they created something organic, growing, alive. Lieutenant Webb and the others watched in amazement as reality itself seemed to heal around them. The cracks in space-time sealed themselves. The artificial star outside began to burn with renewed vigor, and the massive structures that surrounded them transformed from tools of consumption into instruments of genuine nurturing. Captain, Chief. Patel's consciousness touched Sarah's. I think I understand now. The entity wasn't lying about everything. The galaxy does need shepherds, but not the kind it wanted to create. Sarah felt the last vestiges of her physical form dissolving, but instead of being consumed, she felt herself becoming part of something larger and more beautiful than she'd ever imagined. Her consciousness expanded to touch every star in the galaxy, every world that harbored life, every mind that dreamed of something better. We'll be the shepherds, she decided. But we'll do it our way. Not by controlling or consuming, but by inspiring. By showing what's possible when different species work together. The entity's protests were growing weaker as the cosmic machinery adapted to its new purpose. Without control, chaos will return. Maybe, Sarah admitted. But chaos is also where new ideas come from, where growth happens, where hope lives. Through her expanded consciousness, she reached out to Lieutenant Webb and the others who had remained human. Marcus, I need you to take the ship back to Earth. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that we're still watching, still protecting, but that we can't do it alone. Webb's voice, small and fragile compared to her transformed state, nevertheless carried infinite determination. What do you need us to do? Be human, Sarah replied. Be stubborn and creative and compassionate and flawed. Be everything that makes your species unique, because the galaxy doesn't need gods, it needs partners. As the Prometheus prepared for its journey home, Sarah and her transformed crew began their new existence as cosmic shepherds, but unlike their predecessor, they would work not through control but through inspiration, guiding without commanding, protecting without possessing. And across the galaxy, on millions of worlds, sentient beings began to dream of possibilities they'd never imagined before. Epilogue. The new dawn 3 years had passed since the Prometheus returned to Earth with Lieutenant Webb's incredible story. The transformed crew's influence could be felt throughout the galaxy, though few understood its true source. Wars that had seemed inevitable were ending through unexpected diplomatic breakthroughs. Scientific discoveries were happening at an unprecedented rate. Species that had been enemies for generations were finding common ground. But perhaps most importantly, hope had returned to a galaxy that had been slowly dying under the weight of endless conflict. On Earth, Lieutenant Marcus Webb stood before the assembled representatives of the United Earth government, delivering his final report on the Prometheus mission. His daughter Emma, now 6 years old, sat in the front row, her bright eyes filled with wonder as her father spoke of cosmic guardians and impossible choices. The transformed crew members, including Captain Chen, continue to influence galactic events, Webb explained to the hushed assembly. But they do so subtly, through inspiration rather than intervention. They've chosen to be guides, not gods. President Martinez leaned forward in her chair. And you're certain they're still them? Still human in some way? Webb nodded, though. His expression was thoughtful. I receive messages sometimes, not words exactly, but feelings, images. Sarah's still there, still caring about us. They all are. But they've become something more than human, while somehow remaining essentially human. Dr. James Harrison, Earth's leading xenobiologist, raised his hand. The implications for human evolution are staggering. Have they indicated whether others could undergo the same transformation? They've made it clear that the choice will always Be available, Webb replied. But only for those who truly understand what they're giving up and why. It's not about gaining power. It's about accepting responsibility for something larger than yourself. As the formal session ended, Webb walked outside with his daughter, both of them looking up at the stars that seemed somehow brighter than they used to be. "Daddy," Emma asked in that way children had of cutting straight to the heart of things, "are Captain Sarah and the others happy?" Webb considered the question carefully. Through the subtle connection he maintained with the transformed crew, he could sense something that might have been contentment, purpose, even joy, but of a kind that no longer fit human definitions. "I think they're at peace, sweetheart. They're doing something very important, something that helps everyone in the galaxy live better lives. Will I ever meet them?" Webb knelt down to his daughter's level, seeing in her young face the same curiosity and determination that had driven humanity to the stars in the first place. "Maybe someday," he said. "But for now, we have our own important job to do. We have to be the best humans we can be, because they're counting on us to show the galaxy what humanity is really capable of." Far beyond the edge of the galaxy, in a realm where thought became reality and consciousness danced among the stars, Sarah Chen felt the warmth of Webb's words as he spoke to his daughter. The sensation was different from physical warmth. It was the feeling of purpose fulfilled, of sacrifice given meaning. Around her, the 18 other transformed humans worked tirelessly at their cosmic duties. Chief Patel was guiding the development of clean energy technology on a dozen worlds. Dr. Vasquez was inspiring medical breakthroughs that would save millions of lives. Each of them had found their niche in the vast tapestry of galactic civilization. But they remained connected, their individual consciousnesses linked in a network of shared purpose and mutual support. They were no longer human in the biological sense, but they had retained everything that made humanity special: the drive to explore, the willingness to sacrifice for others, the stubborn refusal to accept that problems couldn't be solved. "Sarah," Chief Patel's mental voice reached across the cosmic void. "I'm detecting something interesting in the Andromeda spiral, energy signatures similar to what we encountered with the old entity." Sarah's consciousness expanded to encompass the neighboring galaxy, her perception touching the edges of something vast and ancient stirring in the darkness between stars. "More shepherds?" Dr. Vasquez asked, her scientific curiosity undimmed by transformation. "Or more parasites?" Sarah replied grimly. "Either way, it looks like our work here is just beginning." The realization settled over the transformed crew like a weight. They had solved one cosmic problem only to discover that the universe was full of such challenges. Ancient beings that had grown corrupt with power, civilizations on the brink of self-destruction, the eternal struggle between order and chaos that played out on scales beyond mortal comprehension. But instead of despair, Sarah felt something that surprised her: excitement. The same thrill she'd experienced as a young captain facing her first deep space mission. The same sense of possibility that had driven her to accept command of the Prometheus in the first place. "Well then," she said to her crew, her mental voice carrying harmonics of determination and hope, "I suppose we'd better get to work. The galaxy won't shepherd itself." And so the transformed crew of the Prometheus began their greatest mission yet, not just protecting their home galaxy, but reaching out to touch other spirals of stars, other communities of life that struggled, with the same fundamental questions about power, responsibility, and what it truly meant to transcend one's origins. Back on Earth, Lieutenant Webb tucked his daughter into bed and told her stories of brave captains and impossible choices, of friends who had become something more than human while never forgetting what humanity meant. Emma listened with wide eyes, already dreaming of the day when she might face her own cosmic adventure. And in the space between dreams and waking, between the known and the unknowable, the universe itself seemed to whisper with new possibilities, as if reality had remembered how to hope again. The galaxy had its shepherds, not the controlling, consuming entities of the past, but something new. Guides who led by example, protectors who preserved through inspiration, gardeners who nurtured growth without stifling freedom, and at the center of it all, the transformed, Crew of the Prometheus continued their endless watch, proving that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from holding on to power, but from learning when and how to let it go. The stars burned brighter, and the future, infinite and full of promise, stretched out before them all. The end.